It's the Cinnamon. It is indeed a new episode. Oh, we're here to brighten your Monday with our 30th episode. I am joined by my usual co-host in life, Mr. Doug Davidson. How you doing, sir?
Aw, you don't think Lindsay's gonna get hurt when she Leslie, excuse me, is gonna get hurt when she hears that?
No, she'll get hurt that you mispronounced her name.
Whoa! I fixed it.
Oh, okay then. All right,
and you can fix it in post. This never happened. I know who Leslie is.
Won't. We are joined with a guest, yet another guest. Doug, would you like to introduce our guest?
I would love to introduce our guest. We have a very accomplished young lady who is going to be joining us today. It's Miss Nicole Ackman. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm so excited to be on. Thank you guys so much for asking me.
Oh, absolutely. So before we introduce you in full, we always begin every episode by asking, you watched anything interesting lately? So what have you been watching?
What have I been watching? I actually just finished watching the Catherine the Great miniseries with Helen Mirren because obviously The Great just dropped on Friday, and to kind of prep for a very non-historically accurate take on Catherine the Great, I thought I would go back and watch, I think this Catherine the Great came out last year maybe, to kind of give myself a more traditional period look at the same figure. And I really enjoyed it. It's just 4 parts. I think it's on HBO. I can never remember what's on HBO and what's on Hulu because I have them combined. But Helen Mirren's great in it. It's just 4 hours long, and it's really gorgeous costume and production design. So I enjoyed that. And then the other thing I've watched for the first time this week was Snowpiercer, which I'd never seen before.
Ooh.
Which was really exciting. I'm a huge Chris Evans fan, as anyone who follows me on Twitter will know. And I'd never seen that one, and it was really, really great to get to catch up on it. Obviously, that also has a TV show associated with it dropping, I think today. So today being Sunday. So I wanted to catch up on that before that TV show started. And it lined up really well because Next Best Picture was doing an episode about it as a kind of a throwback review. And I really loved it. I was super impressed. The production design, again, is great. And Chris Evans is great. And Tilda Swinton is always great. So I really enjoyed that.
Those teeth. Oh, those teeth.
Oh, God, the teeth.
And what is it? Allison, am I getting this right? Allison Pill?
Yeah.
Yeah, Allison Pill as the teacher who's, everything's fine and great and be good, kids, pulls out an Uzi.
God, that part really shocked me. I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with Snowpiercer, that was co-written by Bong Joon-ho and directed by him. It was also, I believe, written by Kelly Masterson and based on a French graphic novel.
Yep.
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen Snowpiercer, to call it a wild ride puts it mildly. It is a really interesting exploration on classism. I would caution you that for anyone unfamiliar, it'll feel eerily familiar to what's going on right now.
Yeah.
With isolation and who has access and who doesn't.
The one thing I learned from that movie is that babies taste best.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Why did you have to say that?
It's my favorite line in that whole movie.
Oh, my God.
Oh.
Yeah, but you say it with delight. It wasn't said happily in that film.
No.
Oh, maybe that's me.
Rhyminy. Awesome. Is that all you've been up to, the miniseries and Snowpiercer?
I'm trying to think. I know I've watched other things. I watched a lot of Julia Hart films because I was writing a piece on her, and I'd not seen Fast Color or Stargirl or Miss Stevens. So I watched all 3 this week, which was a wild ride to kind of blaze through someone's filmography like that. But they're all really impressive. Miss Stevens, for anyone who is a Timothée Chalamet fan who isn't familiar with some of his earlier work, he has a really good monologue bit that he does like at a drama competition in Miss Stevens. That's really good. I really enjoyed that. And I love Gugu Mbatha-Raw. That's going to come up later, I think, in this episode. So getting to see her in Fast Color was really fantastic. And that movie has really cool special effects as well.
Yes, it does. I was disappointed that it didn't get better treatment by Lionsgate. I think they put it on, I think the name of the label was like Black Code or something. And they just didn't put any support behind it. I think it hit, I don't know, 10, 20 theaters. And they were like, we're done.
Yeah, Lionsgate and the Lionsgate.
They got nothing. They got nothing, Daryl, which is truly a shame, because even though we've got, I think it's fair to describe it almost as hundreds of superhero stories, this was a story that had superhuman elements but weren't central to the real drama and narrative of the film. And it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, you've seen that one?
Yeah, yes I have.
It's always hard to tell. We'll talk about that later. So it's hard to tell with it. Daryl has a way of being like, oh yes, this movie. No idea what it is. So we'll find out. Find out later. Well, Daryl, how about you? Have you seen anything of interest you'd like to recommend?
No. Daryl spent all last week putting in 70 hours of work at the job. So my time was extremely limited between working and eating and sleeping. That's pretty much what my last week was compromised of. So I got no chance to watch anything of note recently. I did, however, rewatch for the first time since 9-10 the original Disney's Jungle Book for a different podcast.
Refried Scenes?
Yes, for Refried Scenes. We did
gotta plug that stuff, man. Gotta plug it. People need to know.
The 67 Jungle Book and, of course, the Favreau Jungle Book. The circus version was briefly mentioned. But I rewatched both of those for the podcast, and yeah, that was about it. That's not part of the classic Disney run. Like when people talk about Disney films, like the best, there's Cinderella's and Sleeping Beauty in your 90s shit. But no one ever talks about Jungle Book, which is kind of sad because I dug it. It's quick and it's pretty fucking fun. And also, Bare Necessities, not the best song in that movie. I don't know why everybody props it up. It's not the best song. I Want to Walk Like You, or that's the best song in that movie.
Agreed.
It's been forever since I've seen it, so I have no opinion.
Yeah, that was me going into this movie. I was like, what? I have seen this, correct? And yeah, I think I was very, very wee lad last time I watched it. Favreau joint still holds up as one of the best, if to me, not the best of this new era of Disney, whatever you want to call it, live action joints.
I think you're mispronouncing Pete's Dragon there.
I'm definitely not mispronouncing Pete's Dragon.
I'm pretty sure when you say the best one, it's pronounced Pete's Dragon.
Well, I need you to go back and relearn English and how to pronounce things. So.
I teach communication, sir, not English.
well, maybe that's the problem. I do believe I might reserve that for Mulan when it comes out, but we shall see.
We shall. Only a select few in the world have seen Mulan right now.
Yes.
It had started doing press screenings in early March. So I know a few folks who have seen it, and they're like, this review may never see the light of day.
I talked about that on last week's Paprika. There's a scant few people who actually put eyeballs to this movie, and from what I've heard, they're quite impressed with it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Keeping my fingers crossed.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. I got to say, though, there is something about going back and revisiting something that you haven't seen in a while. And how time and experience shifts how you approach it. Recently, Paramount released Top Gun, Days of Thunder, and War of the Worlds on 4K, and so I was sent review copies for them. I haven't seen Days of Thunder and Top Gun in literal decades. Top Gun is still fantastic. The chemistry and the dialogue is still incredibly quotable. Days of Thunder, which I think I saw last when I was around 10 to 15 years old, used to bore the hell out of me, and it's quite good. I mean, it's Top Gun and race cars, and it's a little ethically problematic in some areas, but it's far more entertaining than I gave it credit for as a kid. So if you haven't, if you two or anyone else hasn't revisited Top Gun or Days of Thunder, give it a look.
Boom.
That's funny because the other thing I did watch this week was I was at my parents' house last night, and my little sister and I found the DVD to Barbie, the Island Princess movie, which we used to watch all the time when she was like 4. And we put it in because we were like, I know we watched this like weekly for a while and I have no memories of it. And we discovered I still knew every word to every song. It was kind of weird. I was like, I lost all the math I ever studied, but I still have this. Like,
well, I mean, you got to
save room for the
prioritize.
important things.
Yeah, you got to prioritize what's important in life.
yeah.
Song lyrics will always trump anything other than basic math.
Yep, basically.
Sounds about right. 4 films I want to mention before we shift gears. I saw between this recording and the last one, the 2 Paddington movies. This world is not good enough for these movies to exist.
We don't deserve them.
Oh my God, they're so amazing. They are so sweet and so kind. This world will not be good to it. They are just so wonderful. I just want to adopt this world and keep it safe. And they're just so well executed from the design work, the playfulness that exists in it. It is, I was weeping by the end of Paddington 2. I couldn't handle it. It was so weird. Have you seen them, Daryl?
I saw the first one and I was like, all right, that's enough. And I didn't see the second one.
I think the second one's better.
What's that?
I think the second one's better, actually.
That often happens.
And it also has like Hugh Grant in this really campy villain role, which I think is actually what he excels at.
Yeah, I mean, he is on record as saying that is his favorite movie he's ever done.
Really?
Yeah.
Which
is a weird way to pronounce Man from U.N.C.L.E., but whatever.
He was barely in that movie. But I will say, and Nicole, I know you have feelings on The Gentleman, and we don't need to get into that. I agree with several of your feelings. But Hugh Grant is flipping amazing in The Gentleman.
Yeah, he is.
God, I love it. He's like the only thing I liked in that movie.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
Not even Colin Farrell, huh?
I like Colin Farrell better in other stuff.
Okay.
As much as, and I actually do like Colin Farrell, I feel like a lot more than the average person. But that's just not my movie.
Because he's so pretty.
Yeah, which is unfair.
Oh.
It is. It honestly is. And he is an incredibly versatile actor.
Yeah.
Incredibly versatile. Another movie I wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys got a chance to see it. It came out for rent and purchase Friday the 15th with Scoob. Have you guys checked that out yet?
No, sir.
Oh, dude.
I haven't. I've been too afraid to because like Scooby-Doo was my thing growing up. Like I was obsessed with Scooby-Doo, and I've been waiting to see if people who were fans of Scooby-Doo said to watch it.
Okay. My wife, for those of you that don't know, and Nicole, you may not be aware, I mean, everybody that regularly listens to the show has heard of Crystal. She's, her and Casual Confections is the unofficial sponsor of the cinnamon.
Shout out.
Shout out. Have to do at least one. But she's the editor for EOM. There is nothing that I write or anyone writes for our website that she doesn't publish. And luckily, she was able to watch Scoob with me. She would not shut up. It was horrible because she was losing her mind at all of the references.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, they're really, if you are a Hanna-Barbera fan, this film is for you. It's I think an entertaining Scooby-Doo movie, but what it does really well is open up the door to this Hanna-Barbera universe. For example, when you first meet Shaggy, he's walking along sort of near the boardwalk in Venice, California, and he's got his, I guess, iPhone or iPod. I have an iPod to listen to my music, and he's going through playlists for 60s, 70s, and 80s, and there's a sign for something referencing Casey Kasem behind him.
Oh.
There's a storefront that says Pebbles Pet Shop.
Oh.
Let's see. Something happens, and you end up seeing a Hong Kong Phooey arcade game.
Oh my my God. Okay, you've convinced me. I think I need to watch it.
Yeah, there's billboards everywhere referencing Jellystone Park and all these other little things, but there's also characters that you meet that suggest that they are in this world. So if you were ever a Hanna-Barbera fan, it is a ton of fun. The voice acting, I honestly think they could have gone with more not professional actors. Nobody's showing up to Scooby-Doo because they want to see Simon Cowell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you get a few of them. Billy West and John DiMaggio are in there, but this could have been fine with people that have done the voice work. Matthew Lillard certainly could have still done Shaggy. Will Forte is fine, but it is highly entertaining. It is certainly rewatchable, and if you are a fan of Hanna-Barbera, you want to check it out, hands down. So that if it ain't for you, there you go. But apparently, some folks, I haven't seen them myself, but I've heard rumblings that people are like, this movie destroys my childhood. No, it doesn't. This movie coming out doesn't destroy the 51 years of entertainment that has come out with Scooby. This is just a soft reboot for a new generation. So just something to keep in mind. But now I want to transition so that we can get to know you a little bit. Because you've mentioned Next Best Picture, you have mentioned writing articles. For those that don't know Nicole, and you should, she is a writer for, let's see if I've got this right, because it's a bit of a list. Next Best Picture, that website. Yeah. You also participate in the podcast for that website. You write for In This League. You write for FF2 Media.
Yep.
You write for Broadway World.
Yes.
You are a co-host and co-creator, if I've got this right, of Petticoats and Poppies podcast.
Yes.
And you are also a member of the North Carolina Film Critics Association.
That's me.
So you fancy. and you're slumming it with us, so thank you.
Slumming it down here with us.
Now, as I understand it, and not just because of your podcast, but between the Broadway focus as well as some of the articles I've seen to write, you seem to have a interest not just in cinema but stories as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? How did you get into this?
Yeah,
why stories?
I was one of those nerdy kids growing up. I, from a very young age, was obsessed with books. I relate maybe a little bit too much to Hermione Granger. I loved history from a very young age. I grew up in North Carolina, and for vacations, we either went to Disney, and that kind of, I think, fostered my love of Disney films, or we went to the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, or we went to Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. So I kind of grew up on history, and that was really my thing. And at a very young age, also got very into musicals and theater, and I would watch Annie and Oklahoma, like the films of them, over and over and over. And so I think that all of that kind of combined. By the time I was in like late elementary school, I'd started reading a lot of like classical literature, like Secret Garden, Little Women, and kind of that carried through. I was obsessed with my English and my history classes all through school. And then in college, I majored in communications, but then I also double majored in history. And I, at that point, was very focused on theater. And whenever I graduated, I went to grad school in London to study arts and heritage administration. Because at that point, I kind of knew that I was really interested in telling stories, whether that was from a theater perspective or a historical perspective, because I've always been drawn more to cultural history. I'm not much interested in like the political side or the military history, anything like that, but I really like intellectual and cultural history and kind of finding these people's stories and sharing those. And so I got into film. I'd always been a big film fan. I grew up with Turner Classic Movies, like always on in my household. My mom's a big fan of like Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn, Lucille Ball. My dad's a huge John Wayne fan. So like those kind of movies were always on in my house. And I became a member of Next Best Picture actually to help launch Next Best Theater, and did that for I think about 10 months before I was brought onto the film side of the site and kind of everything just snowballed from there. And so, yeah, my path into film has kind of been, it was always kind of there in the background, but theater was really my main focus for a long time. But especially right now, I'm really happy to also have this film in my life, since theater's kind of shut down for a while.
A little bit.
And it's been really fun, honestly, to grow into them kind of being the two things in my life aside from history, which is still kind of my main thing, I guess, really.
Do you find it helpful when you're writing, because you don't just write reviews, you also write essays. I forget, and I apologize for this, you wrote one recently, I just saw it the other day. Was it Meg Ryan?
The Nora Ephron piece.
Nora
yeah.
Ephron, thank you. I'm so sorry. There are very different people.
Well, they're very intertwined, though. So.
That is true. But sheer curiosity, do you find that the historical background, particularly as you're looking at it from a cultural perspective and their stories, do you find that useful when you're writing your reviews for films or your essays about individuals?
Absolutely. I think that I always tell people that if they're interested in like studying history at a higher level, they should, just because it teaches you so much about research and about analysis and about writing. And I think that I got so used to looking at sources and teasing out, arguments from them and figuring out how to slot different sources together. And that's something that I find really helpful when I'm doing any sort of feature or essay or anything like that. And I also think you learn quite quickly how to kind of synthesize a lot of information in a short period of time. And that's something that has also really helped me.
And that's particularly critical these days. And when I say these days, I'm not referring to just the pandemic, just in terms of trying to understand good information versus bad information, accuracy versus anecdotal, if you will.
Yeah, bias.
That it's critical. It is absolutely critical to be able to understand the difference. Do you, and this is, I'm not trying to make you take sides, as it were. Daryl and I have an ongoing, we'll call it conversation. Might be better, might be more accurate as a conflict. But if you're looking at something from a cultural perspective, and let's say you're watching a film or a play, do you delineate or give any leeway to a story that manipulates the truth? Does that impact in any way how you react to it?
Absolutely.
If you need an example, I can give you one.
Yeah, give me an example so I can make sure I understand the question.
No problem. So let's take, for example, Hamilton, something I'm very excited I will finally be able to see, having been singing the songs for several years now. Hamilton, I was fascinated to discover in a PBS documentary, came out 2017, I think, that I'm not a history nerd, unfortunately. My mom desperately tried to make my brothers and I history people, and it just didn't take. But that Hamilton and Burr, unlike how presented in the play, didn't know each other as early as suggested. Their lives didn't cross paths, as he suggests. That the relationships that Alexander had with the Schuyler sisters were a little different, as well as the actual lives of the Schuyler sisters were a little different. Yet the play is quite honestly fantastic and magical and still conveys the information. So do you take any issue with whether it's a film or or a play that will adjust the facts to fit the story?
I guess I have two main thoughts on this. One is that I think that the main thing for me is that as long as it is purposeful, I'm fine with it. What bothers me is whenever it becomes clear that someone messed something up because they didn't know any better. If it's a creative choice, I think that's one thing. But someone like Lynn did all of his reading. He had Ron Chernow advising him. He knew where he was changing what was true, and that was deliberate, and that was to tell a better story. And I think that that's fine, because also I'm going to talk about Josie Rook a little bit later, who directed Mary Queen of Scots. But I was at a Q&A that Josie did at one point, and someone asked her if the movie Mary Queen of Scots was historically accurate. And she said that the thing about talking about films or plays as being historically accurate is that there is no one version of that for most things, because historians still disagree about so much. that you kind of have to choose your interpretation that you're going with. And as long as the one that you're going with is valid, or you can justify why you're changing what you're changing for storytelling purposes, and you're still being true overall to the story that's being told, then that's kind of the best that you can do. And I think that, in the Hamilton example, for example, the way that he changes up Hamilton and Angelica Schuyler Church's relationship is still it's not factually true. The timeline is a little bit messed up, but the general basis of the relationship between them is still true. There are still quotes from their actual letters to each other in their lines to each other. And I think that it's sometimes fine for the purpose of storytelling. I take issue whenever a character, a historical figure, is portrayed in a way that I believe is inaccurate beyond just messing with the timeline, changing small details, condensing things. If I feel that it's, done a disservice to the character in particular. I famously did not like The Favorite when everyone else was raving over it, because Queen Anne is one of my favorite historical figures, and I felt that it dumbed her down. And I hate seeing that done, particularly to a woman or any sort of other minority historical figures, because there are so few that we ever get to see in positions of power, that to dumb one down feels really kind of unforgivable to me. Or something like, say, Bohemian Rhapsody, which obviously a lot of people had issues with because of how it kind of downplayed Freddie Mercury's sexuality. I think that whenever you do something like that you're actually kind of changing the core of the figure, that's an issue. But I'm not one of those people who, there are those historians who are like, oh, we must have complete historical accuracy at all times. And honestly, the storytelling is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm fine with some changes.
By the way, Daryl, this was completely unprompted. She brought up Bohemian Rhapsody. Just want to be clear.
Yes, she
brought it up. I did not bait this.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't.
You baited it by asking the question.
Okay, no. She has described herself as a cultural historian. Mm-hmm. She studies stories, Broadway. You can roll back the audio. So I never brought it up.
Very smoothly played, Doug.
She agreed with me.
Very smoothly played.
Again, Nicole, not trying to put you in the middle of it. I love Queen and hated that movie. Yeah. And it wasn't just because I agree with you that there are certain stories where you can adjust. If you've got 2 hours, even 3 hours to tell a story, you still can't get everything. It's not like there was a stenographer following people to get every minute thing that they said, right?
Yep.
So I totally get that. I was just kind of curious from your perspective. I'm not getting on my soapbox. I watched a film recently where this was an issue for me, and I thought about you, Daryl, and this seemed like an opportunity to ask someone who's far more of an expert than I am about that kind of thing. So it's just interesting because some people will say go to Hamilton and go, that's not Alexander. And then other people will go, yeah, but within the style of the story and everything else is consistent within the rules that they set up, this makes sense. So I was curious from your perspective, Nicole, how you feel about that. So awesome. And not just because you agreed with me. So before we move into today's topic, what are 5 films that you enjoy? Can be any genre whatsoever, doesn't have to stick within historical or period films, but what are 5 films that you love that if people haven't seen, they should check out?
Yeah, it's funny because my immediate answers are ones that I just realized I'm going to talk about later, so I need to not say those right now.
No.
My first one I'm going to say is The Philadelphia Story. Like I said, I kind of grew up on Turner Classic Movies. I love any kind of Katharine Hepburn film. I think this is one of the best. It's a really fun movie, but also manages to have some complexity to it at the same time. Let's see. We talked about Disney live action movies earlier, and my favorite one by far is Cinderella. So I've got to give that a shout out. I love Lily James, and Kenneth Branagh is also my favorite director. so I'm a little bit biased there probably, but I think Cinderella is the best example of them taking an older Disney film and updating it in a way that still feels accurate to the story. It still feels, like what they were originally going for, but it does feel better suited to a modern audience. Let's see. Another Lily James film that I love is Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. I feel like I can't not give a movie musical now that I've hyped myself up as like a theater person, and I think that is a pretty perfect movie, actually. Let's see. Talk about Nora Ephron. When Harry Met Sally is like one of my favorite films of all time. If people haven't seen it, they need to, partially because modern rom-coms owe so much to it.
Yep.
And probably the movie that I've seen the most, other than maybe like the Disney films I used to watch and repeat as a kid, is the 2005 Joe Wright Pride and Prejudice, which I also think is a pretty perfect film. It's any Keira Knightley Joe Wright collaboration is my thing. That's like my preferred genre right there. But I've seen Pride and Prejudice. I watch it like once a month pretty much, so I can't not say that.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Well, then I want to ask you one last question as we transition into our topic for today, which are period films. Now, I was discussing this with Crystal and realized that even in doing some research about the term, that it seems in some cases, from some perspectives, very easy to nail down, and in other cases not. How would you define a period film?
It is an interesting thing because there is some, debate. Some people think it refers to different things. Some people say, any film set in the past is a period film. Whenever you think period film, I think you typically think of your Austen adaptations, your, the kind of things that they tend to go to bat for with the Oscar for best costuming, your biopics, your things like that. But really, I kind of don't consider anything period that's set after like the 70s. And even that to me feels late. I really, whenever I talk about period film, I typically mean like 1950s or before. But it's any movie that is set in a historical period. And I also think like typically the historical period needs to have some relevance to the story itself. It's not just like, oh, we popped it into that genre for no reason. But it includes, I think a lot of people think of it as like I said, this just like, oh, Jane Austen movies, that kind of thing. But it includes those medieval war epics. It includes, most war films fall into this category unless it is something quite modern. And then all those, adaptations of classic novels, a lot of biopics. Basically, most, if Keira Knightley's in it, it's likely a period film.
So you're saying Black Pearl is a period film?
I mean, it technically is a period fantasy.
Well, and see, here's the interesting thing with that. The discussion I was having with Crystal is that I always understood that any period film, and I agree with you, biopics based on literature, etc. But it's really any film that isn't relevant to the modern era, right?
Yeah, that isn't set contemporary.
Yeah, because it would be, with that, you would get something like Pirates of the Caribbean, pick a film, because it isn't a modern story.
And the one thing with the fantasy or element that I tend to differentiate is if it is something that has a fantasy element, but it's clearly meant to be set in a specific era. So like Pirates of the Caribbean, it's very clear what time period those are taking place in. Versus there is some fantasy that's like, the costuming looks period, but you can't really tell what period it's meant to be at all. And that I kind of consider less a period film. But actually, like I have an episode going up today on my period drama podcast that's about the film The Great Wall, because they do actually make a claim to what time, what dynasty that is taking place in.
The Zheng Yimou Great Wall?
Yeah, the Matt Damon.
Yeah. Forget Matt Damon's in it. Pedro Pascal's in it. Willem Dafoe's
so that's
in
why
it.
We did the episode.
There's also the wonderful cast that is of that community. I haven't seen it in forever. I love the director, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So then I think it would be fair to say I put together a list, as I often do, of films that could be considered period. So it's your Dangerous Liaisons, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, The Handmaiden, 1917, and Dunkirk.
Yep.
But this also opens up the door to films like Crimson Peak, Pan's Labyrinth, Dick Tracy, The Hateful Eight, Titanic. You said Pride and Prejudice. I went Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, just to be silly.
I love that movie.
it's Little Women, pick your version. Shadow. Let's see. I also added, to be silly, Dread, because it does happen in a period. It's in the future.
Yeah.
Blade Runner, which technically we're living in the year of Blade Runner, though not when it was released. So there is some openness to what a period film could be that could shift the way that we discuss them. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Right.
Part of my problem with this is it's a little too open.
Yeah.
You know, like the
Anything
question,
not modern, Daryl, come on.
that's the question. Who decides what is considered modern? Is Jonah Hill's mid-90s modern, or is it a period piece?
I would argue it's a period piece because it was released in 2018, but it takes place in the 90s.
Yeah, well then, shit, I might have to redo my list. No,
we ain't got time for that.
I love mid-90s, by the way. I'll go with my first joint. I'm going to go with Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby. That movie is not great.
Well, I'm so glad you included it then.
I went through a period in high school where I was obsessed with that movie. So.
It's great. It's like the story. I mean, the Great Gatsby, you know, F. Scott. It is a good story, but this is not a wonderful adaptation of that story. I don't think it's not the best Leo performance. Carey Mulligan puts in a lot of good work, and I'm not all that familiar with Tobey Maguire outside of Spider-Man to judge, you know, where this ranks in his filmography. But I think this movie flies solely on direction, cinematography, costume design, and set design. This is an incredible movie to look at. It makes you want to be a part. I think a great mark of a period piece is that it makes you want to have lived in that time, or if you did live that time, say the mid-90s, if it wants you to think fondly back on that time. This is one of those cases where it makes you want to live in that time, because he romanticizes it. He makes it look fun. Those parties look wild as all the hell. I'm convinced I would have been invited to those parties. It's just one of those great visual feasts for the eyes. So while it's not a great movie, I felt that this show would do a disservice by not at least talking about Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby.
Right on. Miss Nicole?
Yeah, my number 3, I'm going to go with this movie, which is kind of a lesser known one. It's called Belle, and it came out in 2013. It's directed by, I think it's pronounced Emma Asante, and it stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw. So for people who, you know, have kind of discovered her in more recent years, it's, I think, her strongest performance. It really pains me that she wasn't nominated for an Oscar for it, but it is about this woman named Dido Elizabeth Bell, who is known because she had this portrait made of her, and she was a half-Black woman. And there's this famous portrait of her with her white cousin who she was raised alongside. And it's one of the first portraits that you see a white woman and a Black woman kind of shown as equals in a portrait together. And she was a really fascinating woman who was brought by her aristocratic white father to be raised by his aunt and uncle in England. And it deals with kind of her life. And it's one of those classic British period pieces that has like one of those casts that's got Penelope Wilton and Tom Wilkinson and Emily Watson and Miranda Richardson and James Norton and Tom Felton and like every person that's ever been in a British period drama. It's a really moving movie, and it's not totally accurate to her life, but it does a really good job of bringing across the important points kind of from across her whole life and kind of centering them into 1 2-hour film.
Right on.
Wow. Awesome. I think I recently saw something about Belle, and is that associated with Disney at all, or am I making that up?
Nope, it's not. Which is funny because then Gugu Mbatha-Raw was in Disney's Beauty and the Beast live action remake.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, she plays the feather duster.
Oh, okay. I'm halfway through Jungle Book. We got it for Connor, my son, when he was much younger, and we got, I think, about to where Scarlett Johansson's snake shows up, and then never got past that. Not because he didn't like it; it's just we never went back to it. And Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast are ones that we haven't checked out yet. So I will try and remember that. My film is one I've talked about before, and when I think of period films, it ranks high up on my list. And of course, the films that I'm including are not ranked in any particular order, but certainly, I mean, you brought up The Great Wall a few minutes ago. That ain't it. I'm talking about Hero, Zhang Yimou's film from 2002. I love everything about this film. It is a film in which I would not want to live in this era at all, but it is filmed so beautifully. Where, for those unfamiliar, it's about an assassin whose name is nameless. He's never given a name, played by Jet Li. And his task is to tell the story of how he defeated the Emperor's enemies. And every time he tells a story, he's allowed to get closer to the Emperor. And each story that is told, it has a different conflict within it, is presented with a different color, and each one, and it's what I love about a good fight sequence, each one communicates something different. In fact, one of my favorites is the opening sequence, which has Jet Li fighting against Donnie Yen, who plays an assassin by the name of Sky, and the majority of the fight actually takes place in their mind. And it's only until a string breaks on a, I think it's called a Zephyr, that once it breaks, they sort of snap out of this trance and they immediately fight, and the fight is over. But it is very meditative, it is very thoughtful, and it is just a beautiful watch. So if you haven't seen it, please put it on your list. So that's my number 3.
It's an interesting reflection of Rashomon as well. A lot of multiple same things from different points of view as well.
Interesting. That is another one on my list.
Rashomon?
My Kurosawa is, I have a long Kurosawa list to still have to get to.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested, Hero is currently $40 on Blu-ray on Amazon right now.
Oh,
I already have it.
Yeah, I cannot find it for the life of me.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is why I buy movies. Not digitally, I buy them physically. Because when the digital license disappears, I can still watch it.
Yeah, I picked it up on DVD and I was like, this is one that I definitely will upgrade to Blu-ray on. And when I made that decision, things were already spiraling out of control far too quickly.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I've only just seen the price rise.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll be holding on to my Steelbook.
Smart man.
So what is your number 2, Sir Darryl?
It was mentioned earlier, not the positive light, and I fucking love it. It's The Favorite.
Everyone else loves this film. It's me and like all of the other women that I know who work in the history field who hate it. So
right on. I think this movie is wonderfully shot, well acted. This is what got Olivia Colman her Oscar, I do believe. Although I'm not sure if that was deserved, but she got it, so I'm still happy. It made me because I really haven't paid much attention to Yorgos Lanthimos as a director, and it made me kind of reevaluate. Maybe I need to go back and check out some of this dude's other work, like The Lobster and Dogtooth and all that kind of nonsense. This is my weak spot as far as genres are concerned. I'm not a big period piece guy, so this one I wasn't originally interested in. But I was like, why not? Let me venture outside my boundaries and go check this movie out. And I'm so glad I did. I love the one-upsmanship, if you want to call it that, between Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz vying for Elizabeth Colman's affections and attentions, and seeing the duplicitous nature is something that you hadn't quite seen Emma Stone really do, as far as I know, in films. So it was nice to see her kind of explore that route as well.
It's interesting. I without knowing the history, certainly as closely as others, I quite enjoyed the film from a directorial cinematography standpoint. I recently watched Emma. I actually watched it 2 nights ago.
Hey.
And had no idea watching it that was a first-time directorial debut from Autumn to Wild, because everything about it is so precise, so lovely, and so wonderful that it certainly feels like someone who is old hat at feature films. She's apparently a renowned photographer and has directed, I think, a series of either shorts or music videos. But this is her first feature, and I couldn't help but think of The Favorite because of similar directorial approaches.
Yeah, Emma was everyone's talking about what was your last movie before the world shut down, and for me it was Emma, and unfortunately
it was mine too.
I Chris Bakered it and I fell asleep in the theater.
No!
Yeah, I met an old high school friend who I hadn't seen in a couple of years. We had a big lunch and then a couple of drinks, and I immediately went from there to a dark theater, and so it wasn't for lack of interest. My body was out. But what I did see, I was really enjoying, especially Bill Nighy's performance. I thought,
he is amazing.
So good.
He's amazing in everything.
True.
And I do want to say that my thing with The Favorite is, and I have the same issue with The Greatest Showman, I do not like that they tried to sell it as a movie about certain historical figures when I think it would have been better off just to have it be a fictional queen. Based loosely on what it's based on, because it is so loose. Okay. That it's kind of the claiming to be historical when it's not that bothers me about it. And that's my issue with The Greatest Showman is I'm like, sorry, but that's not P.T. Barnum, who was actually a bad man.
Yes, he was.
Right. So like that's kind of my issue is sometimes I think that directors and writers forget that they can just make up something and set it in a period. We don't have to claim it's a real person.
Right. And I think that's part of one of the many false fronts of Hollywood is if we claim that this is based or loosely based on something that happened, that will get more people interested and in theaters to watch it.
Yep. All right. Well, do you have any more to add about The Favorite, Darryl?
Oh no! I mean, it was my when we did our top 10 of what was that 2018. It was my number 2. I expounded on it quite a bit on that episode, so no need to harp on it again.
Okay, cool, Miss Nicole.
All right, I'm gonna try and keep this short, but I mentioned earlier Mary Queen of Scots, and I have a very personal connection to this film. Mary Queen of Scots has been like my favorite historical figure since I was maybe 7 years old. And when they announced this movie, I was very excited and very nervous. And then they announced that Saoirse Ronan, who is my favorite actress, would be playing her. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. But I knew the director, Josie Rook, and it was her directorial debut because she's like renowned in the London theater scene. She was the artistic director of the Donmar Warehouse for a long time. And she directed my favorite like Shakespeare production ever, which is actually coming on NT Live at home in June. If you want to check it out, it's Coriolanus with Tom Hiddleston. And
wait, which one?
Coriolanus.
Okay, you said it so fast. I didn't catch it.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
It's a great production from the Donmar a few years back with Tom Hiddleston, and they'll be putting it on YouTube for a week, the first week of June. So definitely check that out. But I was actually interning at the Donmar Warehouse. I did an internship there while I was living in London for about 6 months in the fundraising department. And I was there while Josie was finishing up Mary Queen of Scots, and I actually got to go along to the studio house in London with her one day and watch an early cut of it when they were screening it. So I got to see it like before they put the music in, before they'd redubbed any of the lines, which was really cool. And then I was really nervous because I was like, oh my God, what if I hate it? And I'm here with her. But it is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's a really great example of how a period film can feel very modern and very of the period at the same time. I think it's a great example of how to kind of pick and choose from different historical interpretations of a person's life. I love that it really borrows from the theater tradition in a lot of ways. You can really feel that Josie's background is in theater, from like how good her blocking is, some of the dialogue in it. And also the fact that there's become this tradition in theater of kind of diverse casting of period pieces, because like we all know that Saoirse Ronan is not Mary Queen of Scots. So why can't we also accept that like Gemma Chan is playing Elizabeth I, Lady in Waiting? Why not? We didn't genuinely believe that that was her anyways. And so they bring that over into the film. So you've got like Gemma Chan and Adrian Lester and some of these really cool people in the cast. And I just think it's a movie that not a lot of people saw, but I saw it 4 times in theater. It's
Nothing
one
wrong
of
with
my
that.
favorite films of all time.
Never be ashamed of that.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful film. It's got like Joe Alwyn and Jack Lowden and Margot Robbie and Saoirse Ronan and all these really great people. So it's one that I always tell people to check out.
Right on. For my number 2, I went in a completely different direction from the very serious and sincere hero. I went to one of my favorite films directed by Amy Heckerling, 1984's Johnny Dangerously. I couldn't help myself. I honestly couldn't. This film is so ridiculous and so goofy and has such a wonderful cast that there was no reason for me when realizing that this is a movie made in 84 and it's set in like the 20s and 30s. There was set in the 1930s. There was no reason for me not to include it on this list as long as we were being creative with that period or the idea of a period film. Michael Keaton, Joe Piscopo, Mary Lou Henner, Maureen Stapleton, Peter Boyle, Dom DeLuise, Danny DeVito. It is just a series of incredible actors, one after the other. Griffin Dunn is in this. Meant to mention him. But this film is highly quotable, absolutely ridiculous, and it still holds up. It still absolutely holds up. And if you are looking for something silly to watch, certainly Amy Heckerling has a wonderful history of directing fantastic films between Clueless and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. If you haven't seen Johnny Dangerously, I cannot recommend it enough. You're not going to necessarily learn anything about the period that it was shot in, but that's not the point of it. It is not exactly a spoof of gangster films, but it is a fantastic comedy that provides endless entertainment. And even if you only watch it once, which you shouldn't, but it's okay if you do.
One of my favorite things about the period genre is that it really feels like it's actually a genre that is combined with a lot of others. You've got period comedies, period dramas, period musicals, period war films. You know, it's something that like, I love a good period comedy.
Yeah, like Harlem Nights.
Yes. I need to rewatch that. It's been too long. Which, speaking of, Daryl, what is your number 1?
Oh man, it's
Harlem Nights.
It is not Harlem Nights, although I'm sad that it is not on the list. It's got to be Lawrence of Arabia, man.
Oh, yeah.
It is one of the best films made, I do believe. David Lane put in all the work on this joint. 222 glorious minutes of eye-popping cinematography. I think Peter O'Toole he defines leading man in this. He's so charming. He's just so good. He's one of those performances that just makes acting look effortless for some people. Like your greatest actors, the greatest people that do anything they do always make it look like, oh, I could do that, because they just make it look so easy and effortless because they're just that good at it. And I think that's Peter O'Toole in this movie. And then you have Alec Guinness up in there as well. Omar Sharif. There's a whole lot going on in this movie. And it's just the life of this dude, man, T.E. Lawrence, and how he just kind of moves throughout communities. He's accepted here and he's not accepted there. And he just kind of takes it all in stride. And he's this abundant character growth all throughout this, from multiple characters and changing of opinions and thoughts and ideas. There's high highs, there's low lows, there's everything on the emotional spectrum, on the visual spectrum in this movie.
Right on.
Yeah, and it ranked pretty high on 100 for 100 as well.
Well, Miss Nicole, what is your number 1?
God, now I'm like, I need to rewatch Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, you do.
It's a great film. I haven't seen it since high school, though. So my number 1 is my number 1 favorite movie. I think anyone who follows me on Twitter would call me out if I didn't say this. And it's the 2019 Little Women. Little Women has been a constant in my life since I was like probably 7 years old. I reread the book every few years. And when they announced that they were doing a new movie, I was a little nervous. I love the 94. And I was like, I don't know if it gets better than that, really. And then it came out, Greta Gerwig was writing and directing it. And then they started announcing this cast, and they literally kept casting all of my favorite people. Like, you've got Saoirse Ronan, you've got Emma Watson, you've got James Norton, you've got Laura Dern, you've got Meryl Streep. And so I got really excited. And this was actually the first press screening I ever got invited to, which was really special. I cried when I got the invitation. And I got to go with my mom. And I truly think it is a perfect adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's book. It feels, again, it's a period film that feels very of the period, but very modern at the same time. I think it perfectly captures what other Little Women adaptations haven't captured before, which is how actually revolutionary the book is in some ways, how modern Louisa May Alcott was. And it's not a perfect period film. There's issues, I know, with the hair and the costumes and different things. I don't care. Because I think that it is the perfect Little Women. Saoirse Ronan is the perfect Jo March. And sometimes I watched this also. I saw it 4 times in the theater, and I've watched it a bunch just at home. And every time I watch it, I'm like, I feel so lucky that this film exists and that I have this, and that I can also hand it to people and be like, here's my personality. You want to know me, just watch this movie.
It is a phenomenal film. I would agree with you on that. I hadn't seen, while I was aware of the other iterations, I haven't seen any of the other ones and wasn't too familiar with the story as well. I'm a bad former literature major. But that film just blindsided me with how amazing it was. Yeah. And I'm currently waiting for it to go on sale so that I can snatch that up. Because I want to be able to show it to people.
Yep. I love introducing people to it. And my sister and I, she's 16. We've got this big age gap between us, but it's kind of become our thing. She has loved Amy March since she was like, God, probably 7 years old, back before liking Amy March was cool. And so she feels so vindicated by this movie. She's like, ha, now you all like Amy March and you thought I was crazy. But we went to see it by ourselves in the theater several times, and it's just become a really cool thing. I had people like coming out of the woodwork to tell me that they'd seen it whenever it came out. Like, people I'd not talked to in years were like, I know you love this movie. I wanted to talk to you about your thoughts on it. And I was like, wow, okay. So
that's awesome.
It's really special. Yeah.
Yeah, Little Women was the first movie I wrote down when this idea was presented. I was like, okay, well, Little Women's probably going to be on the list somewhere. But then, like I said, I felt like Gatsby had to get a little bit of justice. Yeah. And then eventually I was like, oh, well, I got to put The Favorite on there above it. But yeah, I enjoyed the shit out of this movie. I went because you were talking about Mary Queen of Scots. It was kind of like the confluence of one of your favorite directors, one of your favorite, historical figures. I'm in the midst of that now with Dune ready to come out. It is my favorite science fiction book of all time. And then they gave it to one of my favorite directors of all time, and Denis Villeneuve. So I was like, I don't know. And then they announced all 78 people that were going to be cast into the movie. And I was like, oh, this is going to be something. And realizing that Chalamet is Paul Atreides, I was like, all right, I really need to see what this cat is really all about. So I went to Little Women to get some more eyeballs and see what Chalamet is working with. And I came out of there exalted at what an amazing story that is. And he gives my girl Flo Pugh some love. Yeah, he is.
Well, that brings it to me, which is, man, I wish I was somewhere else, because we should have ended it on Little Women. That would have been much stronger. As is always the case when coming up with these lists, I'm always trying to come up with things that I feel strongly about, much like everybody else. But my tastes tend to run differently than others. And I went with the only film that I could think of, out of the long laundry list that I created before, and mentioned only a handful of before we started listing off our numbers. This is the only film I was like, no, this is part of my identity. It needs to be in there. It's 1985's wonderful comedy from Jonathan Lynn, bombed at the box office, is number one in our hearts, Clue. I had to include it on this list. There are rules. And when it comes to Tim Curry, I couldn't include the Rocky Horror Picture Show, though it technically could be. No, it couldn't be a period film because it would be period now, but not from when it was shot. But you've got Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean, Martin Mull, Leslie Ann Warren. I mean, this Colleen Camp, this film is just full of amazing talent that are selling the hell out of this. Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock is so hilarious because they're all playing it so straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I love a good comedy. And honestly, that's part of the reason why I loved Emma so much as a Scruples comedy, is the fact that everybody's playing stuff straight, but it's the way that they're interacting and reacting to each other that makes everything so damn funny. And this film, 2 + 1 + 1 + 2, you won't do math the same way after seeing this film. And it doesn't matter what ending you get. They're all ridiculous. I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife. Yeah, okay, dude. We get it. Homosexuality is just a red herring. But it is such a classic film now, and the way that it is viewed now versus when it was released. I honestly wish I'd been old enough to go to the theaters to see it, so I could have tried to figure out which ending I got. Instead, I saw it on Comedy Central going, that's really weird that they have so many different endings for this movie. It just keeps going.
Yeah.
So I love that movie so much, and I can't wait for my son to be old enough to share it with him. So as we are at our time and we've shared all of our films, if people want to find more of your voice, whether it's in podcast or in writing, where can people find you, Nicole?
Yeah, so you can find my work kind of across the internet, FF2 Media, Next Best Picture, and their own league, and my podcast, Petticoats and Poppies, History Girls at the Movies. But the best place to find all the stuff I'm doing is on Twitter, and I'm at Nicole Ackman 16.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include that with the release information. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you feel like this was a good use of an hour of your life that you will never get back.
This was so fun. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely. And hopefully you would come back one day and maybe we can find some other area. Doesn't have to always be period.
Maybe we need to have a whole episode about Disney live action remake films.
Ooh, I would okay. We will put that in the books. I'm writing it down.
Yes.
I'm writing that down. Disney live action remakes.
It's a good topic for discussion. Like, there's so much to say about them.
I just wait until August, I think it is, when they reschedule Mulan to drop.
When we get Mulan, yeah.
Well, we'll put that in quotes, when we get Mulan. Right now, honestly,
nobody gets Mulan.
What was that?
Nobody gets Mulan.
It's the fact that every movie right now basically has a release date like New Mutants. Rescheduled 15 times.
Yeah, but I actually believe that other films exist, and I'm not positive about New Mutants. So
okay, that's fair. People have actually seen Mulan. People we know have seen Mulan. It's real. It's not a myth. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for taking time out of your Sunday to chit chat with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
And thank you guys for joining us for another episode 30 of the Cinnamon. Be sure to listen and keep an eye out for the next episode where we talk about Tom Cruise movies, since Top Gun Maverick was supposed to be coming out in June. And I've challenged Daryl to watch the film, not the TV show, but the film Rampant, which is currently available on Netflix for you to stream. It is actually a period film involving zombies. And he has challenged me to watch the Nick Cage and Lawrence Fishburne and a slew of other fantastic actors that are in a Leslie Bibb, who is in a sort of drug drama called Running with the Devil, I think are the challenges for the next episode. So be sure to take a little bit of time, watch those. One is on Hulu, Running with the Devil. I think you said Daryl is on Hulu, and Rampant is on Netflix. So make sure to watch those before you come in and listen to what we think of those films. Thank you for spending some time with us, to Nicole and to all of the listeners.
Yeah, man. Thank you all for listening. We will see you back in a couple weeks. Until then, take it easy. Go watch some movies.